What you will hear in this episode is me choosing to stay in rapport with a man who holds, at times, almost opposite views to myself. And where we do meet the most is in how we are both informed about social engineering, about the behind the scenes of the world, the collective programming, and how we held similar views in what went down in 2020. And that we both also do have the desire to see unification and harmony between men and women. But what I've realized in further discussions with today's guest speaker after this episode was recorded, that he seems to think that the way that that harmony can be created is through more of a revival of patriarchy, which greatly contrasts my views of the way forward being about shared sovereignty of synarchy and co-creation between men and women. What you get to hear in this episode is our first ever time of speaking to each other. And after this particular call, we stopped recording. There was more that was shared, and I realized I was hearing some things that reminded me of red pill content. And that's also come through in some private message discussions since this recording as well. But what I really do like is how Matt is willing to be in the conversation nonetheless, and especially publicly. And while he is certainly not a hardcore misogynist, and he even names that he doesn't like that and doesn't agree with that, the name of this whole podcast project, it already filters out those type of guys, right? But the thing is, patriarchy is so embedded, it's so baked into a man's psyche from deep family conditioning, systemic social programming, so much so that really good guys, like today's guest, have this way of clinging to patriarchal views. And from my discussions with Matt, I wonder if some of that is coming from wanting to have a structure, because what is the structure in post-patriarchy? It's unknown to a lot of people. And it's something that I intend to explore and contribute to sharing what that looks like, feels like, sounds like in coming episodes, and certainly in my book as well. So when a man is willing to engage respectfully in this conversation, I'm going to meet him respectfully. And my hope is that new learning gets to grow from it as a result. So while he and I do not get heated in this conversation, it's a very amicable dialogue. I do at times reflect back really different views to him. So while I might not be wholeheartedly able to endorse services from someone who contrasts ideas that are really important values to me into this project, what I do want to share is this first discussion that I had with Matt as today's guest, Matt Castle, because I believe there's real community value to be learned from this episode. Welcome to this provocative and heartfelt podcast, where patriarchy is defined as a paradigm that both men and women uphold in different ways. Here you get to listen in on genuine conversations between leaders from around the world to discover more mutual respect and less division, as well as more pleasure and love in your life. My name is Devashi Shakti, and you are warmly welcome to be part of these Beyond Patriarchal Sex conversations.
So, yeah, to understand the patterns that these men are going through, you really actually you understand the patterns more because I'm seeing the same patterns. Everybody has a different story, but the patterns and behaviors are the same. And this is where we talked briefly off here about the unconscious mind and our behaviors and beliefs and things that have been made up from our environment and that have really affected our ability to show up as a clean, healthy, masculine man for our woman and for our family. So yes, this happened to me. I kind of read a few things in 2015 about that there was an agenda to separate families. And I thought, okay, well, if there is, now I know it's not going to happen to me. So that was very foolish because when you believe that, and we touch on mind control here, when you believe that you cannot be manipulated or controlled in terms of your behavior, your belief system, then it actually makes it easier because you don't understand how you work. And I was a victim of this. My behavior was very childish throughout my marriage. Obviously, some great points there. I was a good provider and I had a good business and we made beautiful children together and all that. But there was behaviors and patterns of mine that led to the disconnect of my wife, where she didn't feel safe with me, or she didn't trust my leadership anymore. She didn't respect me. And when it came down to what happened in 2020, that was kind of, the straw that broke a lot of camels' backs.
I'm
But
sure. Yeah.
yeah, so for us, it was like just, yeah, we completely separated because, well, actually at the beginning, she kind of was following my lead. But after a while, because I was too focused on other stuff and not actually on her needs and her emotional needs, that was where we really started to disconnect. So, it's like when you actually start seeing it, it's not too late, but often that is for a man, he leaves it to the point where um, it's crisis point before he actually gets help. And
Yeah,
I did
well,
that.
and I mean, 2020 just put enormous pressure on everyone that landed on them in different ways. And so it's really great to be able to talk with you today because that was a turning point in your relationship, it sounds like, and, millions of other people's as well, I'm sure. And I've noticed that you have a focus on collective programming or mind control, in other words, as well
Mm.
as the personal journey. And that's collective awareness as well as the personal awareness, because I work like that also.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, look, I from my heart, this is what I've devoted my life to because I do believe that it's affecting the children more than what we actually realize, especially fast forward after separation, then you've got other parents, other stepfather, stepmother coming into the equation, which is a huge emotional well, I would say burden. It's not always obviously some blended families work very, very well, but it does still affect their behavior and their belief system going forward in terms of the masculine and the feminine, particularly. And in order to have a healthy masculine and a feminine from child to adult, what we call rites of passage, um, we really need to have a clear idea of what it means to be a man or a woman and what are the driving forces behind all of that and what are the distractions and what are the influences. So
Yes.
it's yeah, it's something that I'm very passionate about because of my situation with my ex-wife. I actually left the home. I left her in the end because I could see that it was just not working, and we had a major point of difference that sealed it for me. And so I left the home. And, so a lot of situations are the other way around. I think it's about 80% of women are actually calling the end of a relationship. So I really want to see for the children and for mum and dad because it really knocks mum and dad around emotionally, particularly the men, I think, take divorce and separation a lot harder. So if I can get in there and help, people to restore their relationship dynamics, then yeah, one family saved is worthwhile for me.
But
Mm.
let's start at the beginning. And actually, let's go back to your personal story for a moment, because when you describe the version of you that you used to be in your marriage, you were married, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes. And so you described yourself in a way that sounds like you don't resonate with that version of you anymore. But you probably saw that way of being modeled to you. Did you witness men in your family relating with women in that way? Is that where you got that from?
Um, Look, I think that the family dynamics these days is very different because you've got mum is working as well, and my ex-wife was an architect. She's an architect, very successful architect. She had a lot of work on as well as raising the babies. I was a farmer and I had my own herd, my own business, and I was milking cows, so I was very busy out on the farm. So the roles changed. We had it fantastic because we were both working from home, so we had each other and we had our family, but it was very isolating. And I think men need men. This is one of the biggest things that
Yeah.
we are missing in today's society. Men are very isolated, and for one reason, this is the belief system, right? And we've gained this belief system over generations. And it's led to us isolating ourselves. So we don't have clean, healthy men in our environment to also bounce off these ideas and these perceptions and our struggles, our emotional struggles. And so we tend to share a lot more of that with our woman. And eventually she gets bogged down because she's dealing with her own emotions as well as children and business and work and everything. So, in terms of my father he was the provider. So he had his own business from age 18, had a gang of guys, roof tiling, and he was mortgage free at 32, and we lived on a lifestyle block from as far as I can remember, basically when I was 6. And my mum cooked and done everything to do with the house and everything, so she was your traditional woman. And dad and I and us kids, we were out on the farm. We were milking cows, we were doing home kills, we were doing fencing, we were doing catching frogs, we were exploring. We didn't have devices in those days. So my perception of what the masculine and feminine was, that was my safe. And with my ex-wife, she was a successful businesswoman. Which I was like obviously pretty proud of that. Like and even now, like she's fantastic. Idol
Mm.
for my children, and she's going to do very well to for her children and everything. But that potentially led to me feeling unsafe because she was leading the relationship and I wanted to. And so then my childhood mechanism started kicking in. Throw on top of that the isolation, and the isolation causes that to be hypersensitive.
Yes.
Yeah.
That she was leading the relationship. Did you mean that she was earning more money?
At the time, she wasn't, but and I was paying the mortgage on the farm, and she was just providing food. But it was really hard times financially in the dairy sector at that time. We got in at quite a hard time. But then we left there and we went, and she worked full time because I was struggling because I was isolated, and she was struggling because I was struggling, and the
Oh,
farm was just constant work. So we
yes.
decided that it would be easier for our family if we moved and we built a house and we bought a beautiful section. And I was stay-home dad for 4 years. So
Oh,
again,
wow.
that dynamic, it was really, really tough for me and my nervous system. I was this little boy really trying to get my own life sorted. And meanwhile, she's taking care of everything. I really wanted to lead. So I was developing business ideas and things like this, and all around the kids. And then, of course, COVID hit. So it was really, I just ended up going and getting work. So I mean, these kind of patterns are actually really quite common today because there are quite a few men staying home with the children, and she's going and working, and that leads to a lot of the disconnect. And it doesn't have to. There is actually ways of doing that. Um, First of all, bringing it into the conscious awareness, what is actually causing that, and then developing the tools and the communication where and that can be verbal and non-verbal communication between a man and a woman, so you can actually restore that masculine feminine polarity.
I have my own views around what helps bring out the best in a man, what helps bring out the best in a woman in a heterosexual marriage partnership situation. And yeah, I work with a lot of women who want to be mothers, who want to be wives, who want to be, not all of them, but the ones that do, but they want to do it in a way where they can work in harmony with their bodies, with their health, with their hormonal system. And, some of them do have drive and passion and purpose to have a contribution in the world beyond being a mother. And there's so many ways to do it now that mean that a woman doesn't need to work herself in the world that's been designed for a man rather than
Mm.
for a female hormonal system as such. So that there's just the acceleration of changes for men and women individually as well as together is really intense in a pretty short frame of time. And
Yeah.
yeah, it brings up massive confusion for sure.
And it's almost like there's a desire to kind of go back to the more traditional roles, I feel. I actually feel, and you've witnessed a couple of my videos now, my walk and talks, and I live in a very small town here in New Zealand, or between several small towns. And I've been here for 38 years, so everybody knows me. And at times, what I share, it doesn't help my social status, but
Oh,
because for a lot of people, they don't want to hear it. But really, it's a lot of it is landing, and it lands with pain, with for people that particularly are carrying a lot of wounds within the nervous system. And those are the ones that really squabble about it, but others can really see the beauty in what I share. And, you know, the I think this is where we talked a little bit off here again, like around the confusion because there's so much information out there now, and there's so much, so much on social media about misogynist and toxic masculinity, feminism. There's all these different layers of how do we actually create this healthy masculine and feminine. And I feel like I've got the answer. So that's why I share what I share. And it's authentic. I share what I share because I come from the background that I do. I love and respect my mother, and she was a stay-home mum and that. And I'm also like listening to what you're saying, where women are actually wanting a strong, grounded man. So we have to kind of block out the noise of this misogyny and these labels that are labeling men. And a big part of this, I always say that a big part of the distrust in men is actually substance. Men are abusing substance, and I would call pornography substance.
yeah.
It's unhealthy. It gives a man a very unhealthy perception of sex. And we are sexual beings. We need to be able to drive the intimacy on a healthy level and to understand what a woman wants, for a man to actually lead, psychologically and emotionally. And having the experience that I have with psychology and media manipulation and mind control basically, um, I'm able to actually provide my woman with what she needs to feel held and to feel the strength to feel my masculine presence from a clean, healthy perspective. And some of that borders on a kind of a controlling archetype, because when you're leading, it's you're almost you're really instructing a woman or telling her what you want as a man, which is, I think, very clean and healthy, and same for a woman to actually tell you as a man what she wants from you, what she expects from you. And so these are the lines that are kind of blurred by a lot of, the Andrew Tate kind of era.
Yeah.
And if you get me started on Andrew Tate, I'll tell you, honestly, I believe that the man is just a paid puppet because a lot of what he says is actually true and what women actually want. A lot of what he says is what women want from a man, but then he throws in this ghastly misogynist type behavior and voice that he puts in, and that cancels out all the good stuff, right? So
I
that's why I think,
100% agree. And to be honest, I've been quite shocked and surprised by the men that I personally know who overlook the extreme misogyny in what he's saying because they so resonate with the good bits.
yeah,
It's like, oh my God, where is your discernment? Because that isolation that you mentioned earlier in your own personal story, and
mm,
which caused you to dialogue everything with your partner and not have men around that you could talk to on that deeper, real level. The manosphere is picking up on that need very specifically, but it's profiting off men's misery and boys' isolation. And I mean, these guys like Tate, they've got all their money in their cars and they're literally creating success to the detriment of all these boys and men who believe he is the hero and guys
mm,
like him are the hero. And it's actually very sad. And it leads me to say something that I wanted to bring at some point in this conversation between us, that it depends at what stage someone has become aware of collective programming or mind control conditioning in the culture. Because the thing is, years ago, Matt,
mm,
9/11 time, which was a pretty major turning point for people to start looking down rabbit holes. And if they did, they did. If they didn't, they didn't. And then,
mm,
2012 and then 2020, there were other choice point opportunities. But the thing is, way back, it was always understood that there is like an attack on humanity, so to speak. And yes, I very much am with the higher spiritual perspective on that, but just to focus on the social programming level for now. Um,
mm.
what has come in since that time is a lot of very targeted psyops around, uh, men are the ones that are being attacked the most, and this separation, which wasn't there before. And so, what I've noticed is that anyone that's come into this awareness of collective programming, while the dialogue around it has been coupled with this intent to separate men and women, they can't see it because that's the
Mm.
context that they first jumped in at. And someone like myself who's been aware of all of this for decades, I've seen the trajectory, I've seen how things change over time.
Yeah.
So it makes it very
Well,
clear to me.
this is what parenting, healthy parenting, we need to teach our children discernment because our eyes can lie to our unconscious mind. And, the magician is showing us a magic trick,
Yes,
and we're believing, our belief system is believing one thing, and our eyes are basically tricking it to believe something that it's not. And
yes,
so we need to really discern, and I actually personally think, I think that many parts of our reality has been hijacked, right? The man has been targeted to weaken the male so that the woman
yes,
loses respect. The female, I believe, has been hijacked and weaponized in terms of the legislation and structure with what I call fake safety, because it's all contractual and it's all for these corporations that actually administer our lives and our families. They're actually profiting from the interruption or interference with our family. And so I believe that feminine's been weaponized in that regard. And then, of course, the children are being taught all of the stuff that it's psychological conditioning for a life of absolute misery. And
yes,
this is what we're seeing now. We're actually experiencing it. There's a lot of pain from a lot of us. And I think the other part that has been hijacked and messed with is the spirituality, because, spiritually, high vibe is very beautiful, and we all want to resonate from, love and authenticity. But there's also psychology. And psychology, I think, was ruling the realm that we live in, this physical realm, and we are absolutely getting smashed out there. It's a psychological warfare uh,
Yes.
globally, and it's using your emotions. So everything on your social media films is all about getting you as pissed off as possible, so that you actually download that repetitive content. It's triggering your emotions so that imprint is stamped into your unconscious mind. That imprint stamped into your unconscious mind is a new belief and it will change the way you behave, whether it's going to destroy your relationship, destroy your marriage, or destroy your physical health or mental health. This is how it's happening, and we need to know how this is happening. And I would urge anybody, especially successful guys and girls out there, to learn how this works, because the more successful you are, the more intense some of these self-sabotage operational programs are actually aimed and targeted at you.
Yes, yes. And how our nervous systems are so puppeteered by this level of social programming um, is through vulnerability. So with as it was mentioned before, with the boys and men that are being really targeted through the manosphere rhetoric, their loneliness, their isolation, their insecurity is the way in to puppeteer their nervous systems. And
Yeah.
for all of us, that there's some level of like real emotion that feels like it's being met. And yet, and it's never all bad with psychopathology, it's never all bad. You come across a psychopathic type, they can be, extremely intelligent and extremely aware and, very honed in on exactly what it is that you need and presenting that to you. But then there comes all the other really shady distortion alongside that. Um, but I want to mention here because you talked about, and yeah, I agree there's attack on men, 100%. But I don't agree that there's an attack on men more than there is on women. And part of what I mean when I say that is that a lot of, I mean, you talked about how just the narratives that we can go on with, we really need to slow this down, everyone, and always shine the spotlight on ourselves of what it is that we're believing, what it is that we're even saying, and making
Mm,
sure that we aren't being vessels for that programming. Like, we to ever think we're beyond being able to unknowingly do that
mm.
is, I mean, if anyone thinks that they're completely beyond it, you are probably a vessel for it right now, because the level of
Yeah.
self-inquiry that it
Mm.
takes, it never ends.
Yeah, absolutely. And women, like you say, have been extremely targeted. Even just what you're saying about how women really want to be, mothers, and they want to have children, but this whole work sort of situation for women, or the belief around the career and all that sort of thing, has actually shifted them further away from one, finding a man that's going to be suitable, and two, actually having the time and the juggle between, if I leave my job I might not have a career, so I'm choosing now between having a child and having a career. And then, of course, it goes further on, and the whole, the illness. There's so many parts. So this, I talk about this ancient ruling group that is actually pulling the strings. They're using our emotions as these hidden strings, and they're playing puppeteers. And how they're doing that to create your behavior is, it's the unseen, so people don't realize. And there's a lot of attacks on women, like the family, that women are, these creators that are creating families. They create a home, they create life. And so there's an attack, actually an attack on life. There's an attack on the female to attack life, and even like breast cancer screening, things like that, which we now believe actually causes breast cancer. And so there's an attack on the breast, which is the life force of this new life that comes in. So, you know, women are absolutely being attacked from all angles in this regard.
Yes, and the context that I meant to bring in before around that is that what a lot of people maybe don't take into consideration when they talk about this, the weaponization of feminism and things like this, which is all true. They're not often calibrating the thousands of years of targeted suppression of the real full spectrum female power in women that was already happening. Okay. And to miss that entire large timeline of human
Yeah.
history, um, I see that helping men position themselves in more of the victim position and fueling their angst towards women without realizing how long women have been controlled and suppressed and numbed down before that, you know?
Mm.
So there's something about really seeing the larger timeline of things that helps put things into perspective. And like you said, to become aware of what's actually orchestrating all this in the background instead of turning on each other, because
Yeah.
that in itself is an attack on humanity.
Exactly. And this is why you and I are having this conversation right now, and why I do my walk and talks on the beach, much to the social despair that it can create. But, you know, obviously lots of interest. And so this is the thing, like when we first talked, it's like, let's compare notes and see if we can kind of create discussion about how men and women can come together and realize we're actually both being targeted. We are all like, even we look at different cultures, different religions, we are all being targeted from various different areas. This is a very well designed reality that we're living out right now, and it's definitely not healthy. I mean, look around us. We've got unhealthy people everywhere. We're all suffering pain, in one way, shape, or form. Um, but you touched on. The years of suppression. And so the feminine is such a powerful force, life force, and this is what a lot of people don't really pay enough attention to. And I didn't in my marriage either. I thought that I was a good man and good with my woman. And I knew how to, give her my presence and all this and be romantic and be strong with her and please her.
If you've been enjoying the contemplations from listening to the episodes of this podcast and you're ready to take things to the next step, to actually be living beyond patriarchal sex in your life, in your relationship, whether that's one you're in now or one you'd like to be in future. If you are a woman, if you're a man, if you're a couple, do feel free to reach out. There's a no obligation connection call that I welcome you to. And also, if you're a woman that wants to integrate the embodied knowledge that leads to more women being able to live beyond patriarchal sex and more. Also, the connection call is to inquire about training as well. So I look forward to hearing from you.
But there is something more about the feminine that we really have not learnt and harnessed as to, like, basically the energy is being harvested from the suppression and it's being directed in a different way. So that energy, the emotional energy, is actually being suppressed and directed in different areas for whatever the cause is or whatever the agenda is for this ruling group that is pulling the strings behind the curtain. But and this is another thing is like even having a healthy relationship with a woman in today's age is actually really difficult. She's posting Instagram pictures, she's got her own work, she's got her own money, she's off to a retreat in Bali with her girlfriends and all of this stuff. And for a man to actually say, I don't want you doing that, I don't feel comfortable with you doing that, because the potential for her incredible power is to be unleashed on the world and other men be involved in that because women are very attractive beings and they get a lot of attention, and which is their currency, I believe. So, there's like this energetic thing where do we draw the line again? It's the blurred line, and this is comparing notes. Is how do we let how do we give women their personal empowerment whilst also sort of holding uh, accountability for them for their actions, and saying what we do and what we don't want and what we will accept and what we won't accept? Where does that become controlling?
Yes, yes, I'm really grateful for your honesty, by the way. And
Mm,
this is one of the places of confusion that I perceive for men. And I'll just say at this point, for anyone that doesn't know, I have worked extensively with men at a very deep level as well as women. So my perspective is not just this speaking on behalf of women, it's actually a more well-rounded perspective that I have to bring. But so I have a lot of attunement and compassion to the inner process for men, is basically what I'm trying to say. And so, in that, um, firstly, any insecurity needs to be presenced inside of him with his own self-awareness if that's coming up. And also, the confusion around what is leadership and what is control. This has come up a number of times in this podcast already, but this is a very particular influence from the manosphere, which has made it very murky for men to discern the difference between those two things to the point where it comes across as the same thing, but it's actually not. And also yes, this assertion of what she is and isn't allowed to do, thinking that that's leadership, that's you being a powerful man, that's you doing the right thing by your woman and all of this. Um, there is no telling someone else how to be that's going to go down well. That creates rebellion in anyone, especially if they're, have recovered some level of autonomy. And so all we can do is hold our own standard. But if we try to assert that like it's a rule or a command, then that is totally going to come across as patriarchal, misogynistic, controlling in a way that she wants to reject. If, however, a man is so clear in the energy and the paradigm that he wants to cultivate with the woman he's in relationship with, I mean, we've got to be clear about these things from the beginning, right? But as things play out, to be really clear about saying that what you want for yourself, like the kind of relationship you intend to be in, and letting her see herself in that. Am I aligning with that? Am I aligning with that still after all this time? Are we a match? Is this what I want? It's almost like giving the other person room. This isn't even necessarily a man-woman thing. It's just human relating in a sense too. Giving the other person room to see, well, what do I choose in this context?
yeah. Okay. That's a nice answer that we can, you know, I guess get some learnings and clarity from, to sort of keep digging on that, or to keep sort of, yeah, talking about that particular thing. Another part of, I guess, that conversation is actually just a man having boundaries and saying, well, this is something that's important to me. And of course, if other areas of his relationship with her are working good, then she would respect those boundaries, and she would say that that's cool. And I think that that's something that has been lacking with men in relationships. It's something that I lacked big time. My ex-wife, she wouldn't have my child from another relationship in the house with her other two boys.
Oh, wow.
And I should have drawn the line right there and then and said, well, this is what's happening. And if you're not going to allow my son to visit once a month, then really we're not going to work.
Oh, of course.
But instead, I actually went, well, I'll just push him aside and focus on my family and my marriage because that was the decision I made at the time.
Yeah.
So, there's all these dynamics, and this is what I mean with the psychology behind what I guess what a woman really wants from a man. And this is what I said on one of my walk and talks recently, is that I genuinely believe that they respect a man more if he does have boundaries. And I think this is an emotional, innate design of women, is that they have such a intense emotional spike and decline, or basically the spectrum is quite significant emotionally for a woman, that uh, that we can actually create a safe space for her by giving the boundaries to those emotions in some respects, and in respect to not, I guess, not investing in growing certain emotions by staying calm and staying clear with ourselves,
Mm.
so that when she's in turmoil, we're just allowing her to process those emotions rather than actually feeding those, which is what I see with a lot of the breakups that I work with the guys. They're arguing, they're going into argument, and it's just increasing this turmoil, this emotional turmoil, and she's wanting to get she wants him to feel how she feels. He's making her feel horrible, and she's reacting to him as a like holding up this mirror, saying, I want you to fix this. I want you to, well, not even fix this, but I want you to understand how I'm feeling. And I feel like that's a communication that we're missing. And that's why I said it right at the beginning, non-verbal communication is just as important as verbal for a
Yeah.
man and a woman.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And, values, standards, and boundaries are all different things. And one of the things I see happening for a lot of guys is they're being, well, misinformed through manosphere type of narratives that to enforce your boundaries is you being in leadership as a man, but actually to try and enforce your boundaries on someone else's autonomous experience is the mechanism of control.
Mm.
So I can say what it feels like from the inside of being a female with a strong masculine man, that when he's really sure and really clear about what he wants, what he desires, the way he wants things to be, and it's non-verbally communicated as well as verbally communicated, and it's consistent and it's solid and it's clear, and hopefully there's a shared understanding around that. Um, but it feels like when a man is really grounded in himself like that, it's like this invisible
Yes.
not quite the right word, but force field that makes her want to lean into that and want to gravitate to that, like gravity, actually, it feels like gravity. And so rather than this sense of, well, I have to tell her and force her and tell her what she can and can't do and can and can't wear and blah, 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 it's there's a deeper level of harmony that can be reached and polarity that can be cultivated for her to
Mm.
want to attune to you without being told what she can and can't do. That's a erotic dynamic that a woman will
Exactly.
want to
Yeah.
be part of, right?
Yeah, beautiful. I'm so glad the way you ended that too. I was waiting for the punchline, and that was beautiful because that is so true, that there is that magnetic pull, and a lot of this is your selection, your partner selection as well. If you don't have that magnetic pull, then you're going to have to create that, and you have to create that through this through this psychology, through really a psychology of yourself, but also understanding what it is that a woman actually wants you to be, which is exactly what you just described there. So that's really cool.
Yeah,
Uh,
and women want that. Women actively desire that. But what a lot of guys are being so misinformed away from being able to embody that and inhabit that male masculine leadership that makes her want to lean in. You know, guys are being taught to kind of project it out in a way that is forceful, that is controlling. You know, and I get that a man that's more certain and self-assured in himself, more connected to his body and his heart, will not be as confused as the other guys. So this is where everyone's got to step back from all the information out there and come back home into yourself, into your own body, and
Yeah.
you know, create the dance of relationship, the real thing from that place. And look, I
Yeah.
think there's so many things that we could keep talking about, Matt. And I want to go back to a really common place that I see a lot of people getting stuck, which is, you know, women being drawn to the workforce and blah, blah, blah. I'm not seeing that. In the thousands of women that I work with, there are very few that are called to that, and some are authentically.
Mhm.
What I see a lot of is women not actively not wanting to do that. Maybe they have something, but they want to create their own schedule. They want to not be in the 9 to 5. They don't want the corporate career, actually.
Mhm.
And some women don't find that out until they're in their 50s and it's completely stuffed their hormonal system and their adrenals and right. But a lot of younger women now are getting that from the start, that they actually, if they have that drive to create something, they can do it online. You know, they can do it in a way that works with in harmony with family and relationship desires. But what they're not experiencing is the selection of men that are available to be real partners. Because it seems like there's so many guys that so want to put women in this subjugated position underneath them. So there's, and I know that this is might be sensitive for you because you've been a stay-at-home dad and everything, but this thing that I see men doing of, oh, we got to go back to the traditional relationship. That's where you have the most secure role as a man. And while there's truth in that, the traditional relationship, if one is adopting the 1950s housewife kind of paradigm, the women back then didn't want that. They just didn't have other options. And that doesn't mean that women want to be in the workforce, but women are whole autonomous beings. They're not just this one, two-dimensional figure that's going to cook your meals and make your babies. You know, they have whole complex emotional, psychological, energetic worlds. They want to work on themselves. They want to study things. They want
Yeah.
actual partnership, which means that the man and the woman in heterosexual connection are in equal power in different ways. And I find
Yeah.
a lot of the guys that are like calling for the traditional relationship, we got to make women feminine again. Why don't women want this? Women do want that in a way that works with their empowerment, not putting them back in
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess this is again the navigation, like we're navigating the yellow brick road. Like we know where the gold is now. And there are a lot of men and women on that track, on that path now to discover, exactly how to empower each other, how to empower our children with that. And I think it lies squarely, well, there's obviously distractions, there's traps on that road, as we know about Dorothy trying to follow the yellow brick road. There's
Yeah.
traps laid out all the way through that journey. And this is what I mean about the spiritual and the masculine and the feminine. There are traps for us to go into as well. So moving forward into that, I think a lot of it is tribal. I think a lot of it is primal. We do live in an information age, but we are actually information beings. We're actually walking, talking antennas. Our nervous system and unconscious mind, once you learn how it all works, the information that we have all around us is far more complex than what we can download on the internet. It's just our natural primal instinct. So I'm all for a real tribal sense, the fire, the whole food, the dance, the music, the drums, the ladies dancing with their beautiful outfits and, presenting themselves in their feminine. and the men banging on their drums, and like for me that is the absolute evolution of man. Whilst we can still work and live with, the intelligence of artificial intelligence and all that sort of thing, we can still work within that realm, but we've got to explore our primal behaviors. We've got to get together as connection. Men are missing out on connection. Women are too. Children are, devices, fake connection, fake safety, fake food, fake love. Everything is just hijacked, and where true nature and true connection meet is like that tribal element and substance and all of these distractions, particularly substance, chemicals. I was never, being a dairy farmer, we put chemical fertilizers on the farm. I was using penicillin for the cows, regular, you know, obviously I was like, wow, you use a lot of penicillin. It's not really that great, but I went ahead and did it anyway. Now I have a completely different understanding of what chemicals are actually
Really?
doing to our nervous system, which
Yeah.
is creating this unconscious feedback loop of fear. And as you said earlier in the podcast, the fear is actually driving a lot of our behavior, our relationships, and it's really damaging.
Yes. Wow, what a massive learning path you've been on. Such acceleration. And in the spirit of this wholeness that you so beautifully described, Matt, when you brought up that image of the women dancing and the men drumming, and the more the men in their health and their wholeness, I mean, what it takes to have that is to recognize that men have a range of their inner world, of their feelings, and if we talk about yin and yang, we all have that. So men feeling safe enough in themselves to really feel and get in touch in their own ways with what's going on inside of them and coming out of this, static role of just you have to be the provider, you have to be in control, you have to be this, have to be that. We are complex beings, much more than that. To believe otherwise is just to be a cog in the wheel that's turned humanity into you know pawns to create industries that create profit and to
Yeah.
benefit the very few at the top, right? Like we are all whole, complex, beautiful creatures, and the more a man knows that about himself, I feel the more he can understand that range in a woman as well from her yin. Because a lot of guys, again, with the manosphere influence, are like, oh, women aren't feminine enough. It's like feminine is a spectrum.
Mm,
There's yin feminine, there's yang feminine. Some women lean naturally one more to the other, just like men. There are really yang masculine, naturally men. There are naturally and not
that's
from
right.
conditioning, really yin men. Like we are all a unique combination of this. So coming back to that human to human level of being curious and willing to really see someone beyond the narratives and really meet and really relate with each other beyond the collective stories and
Mm.
hypnosis that's going on.
Yeah, and I think that is a very beautiful thing to note there around the emotional, like what you were talking about there, the emotional depth of men has been really suppressed. And for
Yes.
me, I've actually always been an emotional man, an emotional boy right through. Not in terms of crying and, getting upset over nothing, but just very sensitive to feeling that emotion. And, I know that many men that are good with women tend to be more emotionally attuned because they
Yeah.
can feel her. This is emotional, guys. And if there's any men listening, if you're just operating from the logic, you're gonna lose her. She's gonna check out because there's no stimulation there. And that's one thing, like, a lot of women will kind of dislike a man that is in tune with his emotions because she can see and I guess she feels his sexual polarity to or that connection. When a man's in tune with his emotions or with her emotions, there's almost sexual tension and sexual attraction that can be created from that as well. And I think this is a big thing that I see men are completely dysfunctional in terms of their emotions. They're numbing it, the screens and the pornography and the alcohol and the vape and the cigarettes and the whatever else drugs and things that they're using to numb the pain. They're also numbing their emotional connection to other beings, particularly their woman. And
Yeah,
when I gave up alcohol in 2020, that was when I really started to realize just how powerful emotions were. And that's what set me on the track of learning how our emotions were actually being used to create our behavior, because that's the same thing with women as well. Women's behavior is largely um, uh, created from her emotions. Would you
yeah.
agree? I believe that that's the case.
Yes, yes. And for a relationship to be mutually beneficial and like a really great relationship, like you were saying, it takes emotional depth to actually create safety and trust. Because a man just doing all the things that he thinks he's meant to do, but not really being present on a deeper feeling level to himself or with her, is a level of withholding that gives her nothing to really connect to. It doesn't help her to
Mm.
feel the safety that you might like her to feel just through everything that you're tangibly providing. Like, humanity's awakening and the planet is moving along. We all need to learn what it really takes, and I love that you're supporting men to come out of that numbness and to feel safe in realizing that women want that depth. They actively want it, and how you feel really matters, and we want to know. And and this leads into something we didn't really get to talk about today, like the name of this podcast, right? But I want to ask you, Matt. I mean, it's not a term that's been in the collective, but when people hear patriarchal sex, they immediately have an impression of what it means, even if they've never heard the term before. So we've talked about it on the emotional, psychological levels, but on an actual level, what is your impression of what is meant by patriarchal sex?
Yeah, well, when I was invited along by yourself to speak with you, I obviously had checked out your content. We'd only just connected, and I saw the patriarchal sex, and I was like, straight away, I had a vision in my mind of what I thought it would be. So, I had a little bit of a look at some of the content and things, and yeah, it's I think we sort of mentioned about the energy harvest of the masculine and the feminine, and I guess everything starts off with good intentions, just like a man that is able to create his woman's behavior, so that there's the push and the pull, the attraction is there. That can also be taken advantage of, and I think that over time we've just been hijacked by you know this ancient ruling group. There is absolutely people behind the scenes with power and control of technology and knowledge of how we work. So the patriarchal sort of side of that, I think, has been almost a harness of energy, or like yeah, I guess you also described it as almost like a netting or you're almost chained. There's these invisible chains for a
Yeah.
woman, which started off, I believe, with good intentions, where we were just trying to protect her from herself, or potentially protect our children from other men that may be trying to spread their seed or whatever. And I always go back to a very primal level, because that's how I perceive, the road ahead to be more of a primal level of men actually, you know, I guess respecting the boundaries of other strong men as well. So there's always again that grey area as to what, where is the line, where it becomes this perception of the controlling the feminine, the patriarchal, where she has a role in the house to cook and clean and provide children to a man. Almost like there's this belonging or this ownership, which is
Yes.
quite different to, the primal level of a man cannot perceive that he owns his woman. I mean, that would be this kind of what we talked about with Andrew Tate. That's where he gets a little bit too far.
Yes.
But it's a claimation, it's a claim. We're making a claim to that woman in terms of, you know, I'm not sharing her with anybody, and I don't want to, and I also need to keep her safe so that my children survive. So again, it's more of a primal aspect than the ownership type thing. And I think the modern union that we call marriage has created this artificial construct around the union. And if you go down the maritime admiralty law route, then it's all these contracts that are binding, and it's actually a very evil and dark
Yeah.
force, and we need to move away from that and move more
Yeah.
into that sacred union, more into that, the depth of that push and pull. It's an energetic contract that I
Yeah.
think should replace that kind of patriarchal type um, union that we've seen.
Thank you for saying that. I'm glad you see it like that. And you know what? Because of how intense and insidious and the social engineering and just all that orchestration of that hidden realm that you're bringing words to change that, my God, is going to take as many of us as possible working harmoniously together, which again is why the divide between men and women is so orchestrated, so that can't happen. And,
Mm.
um, we're all about the primal here, the tigress path. And this is a level of reality where we actually get that autonomy and being in touch with our instincts once again.
Yeah.
Beyond the concepts, the confusing concepts that lead people, into immense distraction away from really mobilizing the level of intelligence we need to be taking action from at this point to be able to move away from that system that you just named.
We all have a role to play, and the time is now. And in fact, I one of my flaws, and we all have flaws, is impatience. I do move too fast, and that's why I lost my family. I
Oh,
didn't lose my children. I lost my family because I walked away too quickly. Everything was happening so quickly, and a lot of this is because of the nervous system, because of a lot of our childhood influences, not feeling safe as a child, et cetera, et cetera. When we perceive a threat in our adult life, it's more hyper. And, so we all have a role to play, and now is the time. And I do feel like we are running out of time because I think that we are going to have to, it feels like we're actually going to be plunged into more of a, uh, you know, how can I say where it's not a bad thing? We're going to be plunged into a very basic style of living again,
mm,
in order to escape the traps that are set for us energetically and emotionally. So, we all have a role to play, and so doing the inner work as a man, from my perspective, and the men that I work with, we have to do the inner work to realize what is damaged, where's our wounds, what are we trying to protect, how do I connect with other clean, healthy men, and how do I actually start driving my relationships? How do I actually start to inspire my woman to create that attraction and that respect from my woman? And that's what I'm very passionate about. The time is now. Let's get going.
yeah, yeah. Yes, there's so much unknown in the coming near future, and the more harmony there can be between the people, the better to support each other through that in a really empowered way, not turning on each other. So, all right, so I have another little message here, and I firstly again want to thank Matt for his courage to step into this space. And because I have created this podcast from a place of genuinely wanting to see change happen, so leaders who meet in this conversation actually learning from each other, maybe having some slight adjustment in our views, or at least being willing to question things because that's really important to me as a primary outcome of having this podcast and these conversations. I reached out to Matt a few months later after this conversation that you've just heard now. And I asked him, was there anything that he took on board after our discussion that, adjusted anything in his awareness? Because I was curious to know. And when I realized that he thought we were already on the same page and we just had masculine and feminine differences, that's when I realized that, yeah, the extent of the invisible patriarchy here. So what I saw happening was that our differences were really about pro-patriarchy and, or versus post-patriarchy, which is what I stand for. And that's a big deal in the context of this podcast. But to his credit, when I did reach out to Matt to ask and check in with him, he respectfully engaged. But at the same time, he continues to hold on to places in his thinking that I would call patriarchal psychology. And some examples of that, which are not just him as a person, as an individual man, because I've noticed these things in many, many, many men. And some of the things that I'm about to name, have come from other men that have commented on my posts, for example. So I'm just going to point out what some of these signs of patriarchal psychology actually are. Okay, so one is thinking that having boundaries and asserting control are the exact same thing. This is something to be questioned for me. And another thing is that the thinking that men should make the life decisions in the relationship with the desire for a woman to just follow him no matter what. Straight up patriarchy. And the overall idea that women are not actually capable of making good decisions. And something you would have probably heard in the red pill space if you've ever tuned into that content, which is that women always make decisions from emotion. And the thinking that there has to be power play, like power over power imbalance between a man and a woman in order to create polarity, thinking that that assertion of power over needs to be happening to keep her attracted. Yeah. And another one is the view that women having free will and legal rights is why families break up and blaming women for the breakdown of family. Yep. And another one is, and I'm just adding this through my own observations rather than taking it from direct statements that I've actually heard men say. Um, and it's where that way of thinking is actually so close, if not exactly the same, as the views that men from the most patriarchal, misogynistic religions, extreme views that they are the same. They might apply them to different degrees, but the thinking is the same. And as I've been saying online recently, there's a religious movement in the US that intends to remove women's right to vote, removing her right to have body autonomy, and removing pregnancy termination as medical care, no matter the circumstances, which includes incest, pedophilia, rape, child pregnancy, actual real medical circumstances that call for it. And so I have a lot to say actually on each of those points, but I'm going to unpack that in a different episode. But for now, I just want to say a couple of things before I end this, which is that polarity is still present as a felt sense dynamic between a man and a woman's body when he's not seeking to control her. Because as two sovereign beings, with awakened primal instincts, which is what happens when you get in touch with your sovereignty, in that equation, a man is going to respect her. He's not just going to use her and see her as a resource, as a utility for him and his needs and his life and his desires. He's going to respect her mind as well as desiring her body and valuing her feminine energy. So, with that foundation of mutual respect, harmony tends to be the preference of both people together. And in that, nothing needs to be forced or coerced or controlled. So I'm starting, I'll say more about this another time, but I'm starting to say there that polarity does not require control and power play dynamics. And look, I know that everyone has different timing with their rate of growth. And I also believe that we need to respect each other's inner process of integrating and contemplating things. And at the same time, it's not congruent if I let someone believe that I'm agreeing with them when I really don't. And I certainly have expressed that privately. So this is not going to be a surprise for him to hear it. He already knows how I see things, and he's still willing for this episode to be shared. So, uh, yeah, I'll add that I know very well that it's best for men to learn from men. And so I recommend men to learn from leaders of men's work who are all the way on the other side of processing patriarchy. But the thing is, there are few. And with this entire podcast project, I'm not trying to influence men who intend to hang on to their patriarchy because that's not a good use of my time and energy. I know it won't be effective. What I do want is for meaningful discussions to happen amongst those who do want to learn, actively want to grow, and to keep evolving instead of just assuming that they're already evolved without being willing to check themselves. Anyone who's part of that energy, I'm here for you. That's what this whole community discussion process with each episode is really about. So I've got to say, when it comes to men who hold and like the information about the hidden world behind the world, that they learn about that or they educate about the collective programming, I would hope that they come to a place eventually of realizing that patriarchy is actually part of that programming. It's generational trauma, it's social programming. But the thing I keep seeing, and not in every circumstance, but I keep seeing it a lot, and I've been seeing it for quite a number of years, that the guys who like all of that social mind control info, they seem to think that women not wanting to be with them at this point in time is due to the social programming affecting women. They don't quite realize that that has a lot to do with men being unwilling to check their patriarchy. So, a little newsflash here for the truth is that with social programming, you understand the concept of sovereignty, yes? But that means that everyone is and gets to be sovereign in their natural state, not just men. And if everyone is in their natural sovereignty, this implies co-creation. It's where the control agendas of the past are no longer needed because both people's intelligence and experience is valued and considered in making the most informed and empowered decisions that benefit the whole. And I'm going to say more about that in an upcoming episode on post-patriarchal relationship. And I'll certainly say more about it in my coming book for sure as well. So I remain hopeful and I extend and I keep extending good faith to Matt and to others like him, who I do respect for being willing to engage at all in this conversation. I really do. And instead of me commenting further on other things from this episode, which I haven't fully addressed, instead I'm going to hand it over to you as a listener to be part of the discussion. Now that you've heard this, what are your thoughts? What stood out to you? And if you want to, feel free to share, and I do invite you to do so. I just ask that you do so respectfully, whether that means you agree or don't agree with me or with Matt, because I'm hoping that in this community that we're capable of meaningful discussion that demonstrates the emotional intelligence that we want to be seeing more in each other. So do feel free to comment. And yeah, I understand that the learning from this episode and these themes are happening now in real time. Thanks for sharing this episode with your friends if it's moved you. And know that sharing it genuinely does help to spread this message and also to attract more interesting speakers to join the Beyond Patriarchal Sex conversation. And if you're a woman who'd like to get an exclusive discount to the full signature program of how to live beyond patriarchal sex, then write a 5-star review on either Apple or Spotify, take a screenshot and send it in to the email address below to get the reduced rate to the full course called I Broke the Spell. And keep tuning in to these weekly episodes so that we can all be part of shifting division into connection for ourselves and for the coming generations.